So last lesson I asked you to have a go at this exam question. Most of you should have received a mark from me in an area for improvement. These are just two model answers that you could have used. There's two ways you can approach this question. You can either talk about a meander moving and changing, or you can talk about meander becoming an oxbow lake. So the first one talks about that water flows fastest on the outer bend of the river where the channel is deeper, causing erosion and a river cliff. And on the inside of the bend, where the river flow is slower, velocity is materials deposited, creating a river beach. Over time, meanders gradually change shape and move across the floodplain and migrate downstream. That answer needs that final sentence that says how they change over time, that they move, that they migrate. If you don't have that, you won't get full marks. Second approach, over time the horseshoe becomes tighter, so the meander bend becomes tighter until the ends become very close together. As the river breaks through, so it breaks through the neck, for example during a flood when the river has more energy and the ends join, the loop is cut off from the main channel, the cut-off loop is called an oxbow lake. So that's talking about that change over time. So if you could go back to what you wrote, have a go at improving it if you didn't get full marks. So we're now going to look at depositional landforms. Landforms that are made purely by deposition. Once we've done this, next lesson we'll start applying it to a real life example, a real river that has these landforms along it. So in terms of where we are, we're down here, depositional landforms, look at the River Severn, and the landforms we're going to look at are things called levees, floodplains and estuaries. All of them are made by deposition. So have a look at this. What can you see? Where on our long profile, so our journey from our river start to our river's end, do you think this is, and what has formed it? So what can you see? This is a river meandering across the floodplain, and the second photo shows you what happens when that river floods. So the landform is your floodplain, your really wide, flat land either side of the river channel. So a really wide and flat river valley that floods. And where on our long profile is it? Well, it's down in the lower course, right near where the river joins the sea, where the profile, where the steepness is the shallowest, so where it's flattest. Any water that comes out of that river, it's just going to flood. It's just going to spread out and put all that land underwater. And what has formed that floodplain? What's been formed through deposition, and that deposition occurs when the river floods, as you can see in that second photo, and that's what we're going to be going through today. So here you've got a simple diagram of a floodplain. Have a go at drawing your own version. Use about half a page, and where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want you to put in which label you think goes into which. Once you've labelled your diagram, you can have a go at putting these statements of formation here into the correct order. So they're currently mixed up, you need to put them in the correct order. And just to help you, just remember that floodplains, well, they're wide, flat areas of marshy land on either side of a river. They're made of something called alluvium. And alluvium, that is sediment, so silt, that's been dropped, so deposited by the river when it floods. And alluvium is extremely fertile. That means it's very, very good for growing plants, gives it lots of plant food. So a lot of time on these floodplains where there's lots of alluvium, it's really good for farmland. Farmers grow their crops. So draw the diagram, put in the labels, and then put your statements in the correct order. So if we have a look at our diagram now then, number one shows the floodplain, that wide, flat land either side of the river. Number 2, that's called the bluff, so that's the edge of your floodplain. Number 3, that's your layers of alluvium, your very fertile sediment deposited during your floods. Number 4, that's your levee, your raised embankments, natural embankments either side of the river channel. And number 5, that shows your meander, how it erodes laterally, widening the floodplain. So the reason that whole floodplain is very flat is because over time those meanders, they've made it wide and flat. So make sure you got those labels in the correct order. Next one, we're going to go to these statements. So the first process of formation, you've got those meanders that migrate across the floodplain due to lateral erosion, sideways erosion. Then Those meanders gradually move downstream, making the valley wider and flatter. Number 3, when that river floods, because it does naturally, silt is deposited because the river loses energy. Remember, rivers drop sediment, drop what they're carrying, because they don't have enough energy to carry it, so they drop it. Over many years, those layers of silt are built up to create a thick layer of that fertile alluvium. And finally, each time the river floods, it's slightly higher than before. So make sure you got those statements in the correct order for your order of formation for your floodplain. Now we're going to look at these things called levees. So we know that deposition occurs when the speed of the water slows down. So during a flood, when the water overflows the banks, that causes the velocity of the water to slow down. So when the river floods, the water within it spreads out, it slows down, and it deposits its load of settlement. And over time, that deposition, that stuff that it's dropped, builds up the banks of the river so that they're actually higher than the rest of the floodplain. And they look like embankments, look like these raised banks at the side of the river. And they're completely natural. And when they're natural, we call them levees. And the reason they're built up right next to the river is because when the flood happens, the water overflows. The heaviest, the biggest, the coarsest rocks, pebbles, silt are dropped first, they're deposited first, so they're dropped right on the edge. As that water flows out, the smallest particles get dropped further away from the river. And you keep getting flood after flood after flood until eventually those natural levees, they're built up. And it's because water overflows, velocity, speed drops straight away, can't carry anymore, so it drops most of it right on the edge of the river, creating the embankments, creating the levees. Smaller, lighter material is moved out across the floodplain. So that keeps happening, you get your levees. So what I'd like you to do, have a go at drawing those 3 diagrams with the labels to explain how they're formed, and then use my statements to explain how they are made. So levees are formed when. This means that, as a result, leading to. You can use the information from up here that I've already given you, and then if you want a challenge, you can say, how do these act as natural flood defences? So, how are levees made? Levees are formed when the river floods. This means that water overflows the banks. As a result, the velocity falls, causing deposition of the thickest and coarsest sediment, leading to that sediment building up, creating natural embankments, natural levees either side of the river. So if you need to change what you've written, please do. So now we're going to look at something called estuaries. And what an estuary is, it's where the river meets the sea. So it's right in the mouth, but it's where the river is actually tidal. So at the seaside, the tide will come in and out, won't it? Well, in an estuary, the tide can actually, the sea can actually flow up the river and it can come back down. So this is the River Severn, where it flows into the Bristol Channel. And at low tide, this is what it looks like, got all these mud flats. Whereas at high tide, that would be completely underwater. So you've got an explanation of estuaries here, and you've got some example words. What you need to do is decide which word is the correct one. So for example, estuaries are the tidal, well, the mouth or the source. The correct word is the mouth, because where it meets the sea. So estuaries are the tidal mouth of a river where it meets the sea, and wide banks of deposited mud are they exposed or are they eroded at low tide? You just write the correct word. So go through those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences, making sure you write down the correct key term. If you want to draw yourself a diagram, like this one here, but you don't have to. So have a go at that and then I'll go through the answers. So estuaries are the tidal mouth of the river where it meets the sea, where wide banks of deposited mud are exposed at low tide. Estuaries are what we call transitional zones, so areas of change between river and coastal environments, and are affected by wave action as well as river processes. The main process operating in estuaries is deposition. At high tide, water is unable to be discharged, so lost into the sea. The river's velocity falls and sediment is deposited. At low tide, these fine deposits form extensive mudflats. Over time, mudflats develop into important natural habitats called salt marshes. So that is your estuaries and how they are formed. And just remember, it's where your river meets the sea, where the river itself is actually tidal. Tide can come in and out. So we've now gone through our landforms created by erosion and deposition. I want you to go back to your long profile that you did a few lessons ago, and I would like you to add those landforms to your long profile. So in your upper course, that's where we have our V-shaped valleys, our interlocking spurs. In our middle course, we've got waterfalls, sorry, as well in the upper course, haven't we? In our middle course, we've got our meanders and our oxbow lakes. In our lower course, we have our floodplains, our levees and our estuaries. So make sure you add each landform onto your long profile and just add the process that makes it. So upper course made by erosion, middle course erosion and deposition, lower course estuaries, levees, floodplains. So if you want a quick recap on all of those things that I've just gone through, click on the BBC Bite Size link. I'll put it on Show My Homework as well. So you can go through all the information, talks about all the different landforms we've gone through. I then want you to complete the quiz, so the little test thing that's on BBC Bite Size, and just leave me a comment on Show My Homework with the score that you've got. I've just done it, I just got 10 out of 10. So leave me a score, let me know how you've got on. Any problems, leave me a comment. Next lesson, I'll be giving you some information on the River Severn, which is our example river that we are going to look at. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.